Tessa Clarke, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on our Conscious podcast. Welcome. I think we are on probably a similar mission in the
Yes.
sense that hopefully we're appealing to people who want to do something but don't know what and want more information and want some inspiration. So tell me what it is you do.
So I am co-founder and CEO of an app called Oleo, and we aim to make doing your bit in solving the climate crisis really, really simple and fun. So we exist to tackle the problem of waste in our homes and in our local communities. And we do that by connecting people with their neighbours so they can give away rather than throw away their spare food and other household items. So it's really, really great for a declutter. And then we also have 100,000 volunteers who collect unsold or unserved food from local businesses, which could be a Tesco or Pret a Manger or Holland and Barrett or a corporate canteen. And those volunteers will go pick up all of that unsold food at the end of the day, and they will take it home, add it to the Oleo app, and give that food away to their neighbours so that it's eaten, not thrown away.
That sounds perfect to me. Absolutely hate food waste. I know, and I mean, I get the shame. You know, do you
Yeah,
get that? I get the
no,
terrible shame when I have to throw food away, and I feel awful about it.
100%. No,
Yeah,
100%.
and it,
And you're not alone. So we all feel that way, that sort of slightly guilty look over your shoulder that no one's watching you as you throw good food in the bin. And if you think about it, that's a really natural thing, right? Food is literally our life source. That is what we depend on to survive. And it's therefore entirely obvious that we would feel really guilty throwing that away. But the flip side of that is you feel really, really amazing sharing it instead, because as a species, humans are actually really unique. We have evolved to share food and other items. That really differentiates us from most other species. And so it really is hardwired into our kind of DNA as such that we hate wasting things and we really enjoy sharing things as well.
that's so interesting. I wonder if that's why it does feel good to give. You know,
It does.
when you
Yeah.
give a gift,
Yeah.
and
You,
you know that whole concept
it,
of I've
it
never
does. Yeah.
thought of it as our
Yeah,
evolution.
because that basically means that the our community thrives. When you share, when you give something away, it kind of lifts up the whole entire community. And human beings, we are social animals. We survive or thrive as our community survives or thrives. And actually, that's one of the things that at Olio we feel incredibly passionate about is the fact that community has just been so massively overlooked in our national conversation, in our national psyche in the past few decades. And it really frustrates us that there's this massive assumption that charity has to solve all of the problems in the world, or government, or businesses. But actually, there's something really, really powerful that almost all of us are part of, which is our local community. And if we can engage and activate communities at scale, then we can make all of our lives really, really much more fulfilling, enriching, and we can just help lift all of us up together. And so, we've done some analysis, for example, looking at a typical person who lives in a town or city in the UK, and within a 10-minute walk, there are a billion items in other people's homes. So we have no reason for anybody to be going without. We have more than enough stuff for us all. We have more than enough food for us all. The problem is that all of that stuff and all of that food is trapped in some people's homes, while someone 3 doors down would really, really love to access that. And so that's what Oleo is really about, is about reconnecting people with their neighbours so that we can share again. Because I think that's our core insight. We waste stuff and we throw stuff away, not because we enjoy it, but because we feel like we have no other choice. We're no longer connected to our local communities. We no longer have anyone to give our spare food to. So what we want to do is reintroduce people to their neighbours and do that in a way that is safe and fun and easy so that we can start sharing instead of shopping and wasting, which is the current model that we have.
Which is a fantastic concept. And actually, you know, as you said, we're hardwired to do it. We'll come back to the app in a minute because I want to talk some more about how it's working and all of those things. Tell me, where did this come from for you?
So I am a farmer's daughter originally. My parents and my brother, they're still farming up in North Yorkshire. And so I grew up having to work really incredibly hard on the family farm. And as a result of that upbringing, I just grew up with a pathological hatred of food waste. In our family, food waste is akin to committing a crime. And I didn't think anything in particular about that. I assumed that was how everybody felt. Fast forward to, it was about 8 years ago, I was living and working with my family in Switzerland and moving back to the UK. And on moving day, the removal men told me I had to throw away all of our uneaten food. And I was absolutely not prepared to do that. So, much to their frustration, I stopped packing and instead bundled up my newborn baby and my toddler at the time. And I set out into the streets clutching this food, hoping to find someone to give it to. And to cut a long story short, the lady who was normally always in this one spot outside our local supermarket wasn't there that day. And I'll be very honest with you, I shed a few tears of utter frustration that I'd gone to all this effort on a very stressful day. I turned back, I went to my apartment, and I did think about knocking on my neighbours' doors, but I realised I didn't have time for that. And even if they did answer, it'd be really embarrassing offering them my random selection of food. And so what happened was that when the removal men were in a different room, I ended up smuggling the non-perishable foods into the bottom of my packing boxes. And that was the moment where I thought that I had obviously taken it a step too far this time, and that really there should be a simpler solution than me resorting to cross-border smuggling. And I had been working in the digital space for over a decade. I knew there was an app for everything, and I couldn't believe there wasn't a simple app where I could advertise my spare food, and anyone who wanted it living nearby could request it and pop round and pick it up. And that was the light bulb moment, I guess, if you like, for Oleo.
And you grew up, I guess, connected to the land and the amount of
Yes.
work it takes to produce food and the fact
Yeah.
that it's a limited resource. You didn't grow up wandering around a supermarket just grabbing whatever you wanted. And I guess
No.
that's a huge difference.
Exactly. I will always remember last time when I was home on the farm, I was talking to my parents and my brother about this, that I think it was the summer where I was 10 or 11. And I had two younger brothers. They were each sort of 18 months younger than each other and younger than me. So the three of us, we were set to work one summer to hoe a 9-acre field. So basically to de-weed a 9-acre field of cabbages and some other things. I can't remember exactly what it was. And you only have to have one childhood summer spent hoeing a whole field of vegetables to realize that it is absolutely back-breaking work, and that every single carrot and every single potato and every single pot of yogurt is incredibly valuable.
You're talking to the woman who cried when she had a glut of courgettes because I didn't know what to do with them all and I couldn't bear to throw them away. Just
Oh,
so
if
you know.
only you'd known about Oleo, because that's a
I
classic
know,
example, though.
exactly.
We've got lots of people who are keen
Exactly.
gardeners, and there. Let's be honest, there are only a certain number of courgettes that any one person can eat. But you can then make a neighbour's day by giving away homegrown organic courgettes.
Exactly that. And I mean, the other funny thing that springs to mind about my vegetable gardening days, and in fact, I just wrote about that in Wild Woman, which is the book that's about to come out, was it is really hard graft
Mm.
trying to grow a lot of vegetables. And at one point, I stood there in the garden and thought, "What am I doing? Why am I doing this? No one else I know puts themselves under this pressure to try and home grow vegetables with 3 kids and a full-time
Yeah.
job and a house and all the rest of it." And I was really having a good think about whether or not it was worth the investment and whether I should do it next year or actually leave it next year. And my son, who was about 4 or 5 at the time, came racing out to tell me something, took one look at the garden and went, "Oh, broad beans are doing well," and then burbled on about what it was he wanted to tell me and then ran off
Oh,
again. I thought, oh, I've got to
that was
keep going. That
priceless.
one moment, I've got to keep going because he knows what a broad
Yeah.
bean is, where it comes from.
Yeah.
He'll come out with me and pick them, and then we'll cook them and eat them. And just that
Yeah.
connection, I think, is part of what we lack, not just with the natural world, and lots has been covered there, but with the source of our food.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the lack of connection with where our food comes to is a big part of why we waste so much food today. So a typical British household, for example, is throwing away roughly 17 billion pounds sterling worth of perfectly good food each year. And I firmly believe that if we were all growing our own or had some experience of doing that, we definitely would not be throwing away food on this scale. And what is particularly concerning about that is not just the scale of the food waste, but the fact that if it were to be a country, food waste would be the third largest source of greenhouse gas emissions after the USA and China. And globally, food waste accounts for 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So food waste is an enormous contributor to the climate crisis. And then equally as troubling, we have the cost of living crisis happening here in the UK. And we have approximately 10 million people living in food poverty, whilst we've got a whole bunch of other households throwing away 17 billion pounds worth of perfectly good food that could be eaten. So it's really time for the problem of food waste to come into the national consciousness. We need to have a collective conversation about food. We need to value it a lot more. We need to stop wasting it. We need to eat more plant-based. And if we do all of those things, then we're going to be healthier, we're going to be wealthier, and we're going to be happier. So I'm really excited about this because too often the solutions to the climate crisis just feel very difficult, very unachievable. It all feels a bit overwhelming and depressing, quite frankly. And yet one of the most
Hence the
impactful
reason
things
for
you
this
can do in your
podcast. Yeah.
homes. Yes. And one of the most impactful things you can do in your homes is one of the simplest things, which is just to stop wasting food. And actually, I was thrilled to see about 2 months ago, there's something called Project Drawdown. And Project Drawdown is a collaborative piece of research by hundreds of the world's leading climate change scientists. And they said, enough of the doom and gloom about the climate crisis. Let's stack rank the top 100 solutions. And in position number 1, for a maximum 2-degree warmed world is reducing food waste. And that comes above solar power, above a plant-based diet, and above electric cars. And then recently they launched their latest piece of research, which said that for individuals and households in wealthy countries, what are the top 20 things that you can do to reduce your climate emissions? And by the way, if you all do these things, then collectively we can reduce carbon emissions by 25 to 30%. And again, in position number 1, the single most impactful thing that people in their homes can do to reduce their home's carbon emissions is to stop wasting food. And that was very narrowly beat a plant-based diet. So the top 2 things that we can do in our homes to make a difference both relate to food. And they're both affordable and accessible. It doesn't require you to go out and buy an electric vehicle or to install a heat pump or some of these much more expensive, challenging, difficult things we've got to do. They're actually remarkably easy and simple and really fulfilling to be sort of sharing your food instead of throwing it away and experimenting with eating more plant-based.
And you touched on something earlier when you were telling us the story of where this started for you, trying to get rid of those last bits in the fridge when you were moving, and you said the word embarrassment. And earlier on, obviously I knew you were coming on and I was thinking about it all. And not long ago, I had a beef stew that we hadn't managed to finish. And then no one was going to be in for 2 nights. We were all out. And there was a good, probably 3, I'd done a massive one. So there were probably about 3 portions. And I thought, gosh, I wish I could just offer this to somebody because it's really nice. And honestly, when I cook a stew, I can cook a good one. Can't say the same for my baking.
You're making me feel hungry just talking about it.
But there's a level also of embarrassment. Is that one of our limiters here when we're talking about this subject? An embarrassment that, if I called a neighbour and said, hey, would you like my beef stew would you like my leftovers, basically? Would I be embarrassed to do that? What would be the reaction that I would get? People can be quite snooty about secondhand or about leftovers or about those things.
I think you're absolutely right. It would be extremely embarrassing, or certainly I would find it very embarrassing to call up a neighbour and ask them if they want my leftovers from dinner tonight. And that is exactly why we've built Oleo, because what that does is it removes that embarrassment. You just would add those 3 portions of beef stew to the app, and then whoever wants it, who lives nearby, can request it. You then choose who you want to give it to, and they then pop around and pick it up. And so that removes the onus from you having to reach out and contact people separately, which could be socially awkward, to I'm just going to put it available on an app that exists to share this sort of thing, and whoever wants it will request it. And what we find is that the demand for spare food is exceptionally high. So a typical food listing that's added to the app will be requested within less than 25 minutes. So there is no shortage of people who want your spare food. Our number one challenge is encouraging people to take the 10 seconds, which is all it takes, to add that listing to the app. Because, as I say, there's no shortage of people who want to get out of the home, go for a walk, explore their local community, and pick up some free food. I think it's fair to say that the inner student in all of us never quite dies, and the appeal of free food is really strong. And then you get to have that doorstep connection. It feels amazing to give that away. And you get to build a bit of a relationship with someone who lives locally. And again, in this day and age, when we have millions of people in our local communities who are struggling to make ends meet, getting 3 portions of a homemade beef stew really could be pretty game changing.
It's great, isn't it? And I love that idea also of meeting people that you wouldn't have necessarily met in your own community. So creating
Absolutely.
relationships, making friends.
Yeah.
Is that
And
something
that's,
that you're finding?
it is. So when Sasha, my co-founder, and I, when we set up Oleo, we looked at it with a very, I guess, sort of logical, analytical brains. We said, look at all this inefficiency. We need to create a marketplace. We can match these people up and we solve this problem of waste. And we were really motivated by removing waste and helping to solve the climate crisis. Within about a week of launching Oleo, what we very, very quickly heard from people was that they loved not having to waste things, but the real magic was the human connection. And we've run some analysis, and our community has told us that 40% of them say that they have made friends through the Oleo app. 66% say that sharing has improved their mental health, and 75% say that sharing has improved their financial well-being. So that social impact is just as powerful as the environmental impact.
And those 3 things really are what we're hearing on the news all the time:
Yes.
environmental, financial well-being with the cost of living crisis, and of course mental health.
Mental
We're in
health. Yeah,
crisis in terms of mental health,
we are.
particularly in this country.
We are. We have a loneliness epidemic in this country, and all those 3 things are also really inextricably linked. And once again, it's amazing how powerful community can be in solving all of those 3 problems.
Really extraordinary. So tell me how well the app has done. I mean, when did you launch?
So we launched the app across the UK in January of 2016. And as of today, we have had about 7.5 million people join the Oleo community. Together, they have shared over 140 million portions of food. They've also shared 10 million household items, because you can give away toiletries and cleaning products and books and clothes and toys and garden furniture, etc., on Oleo. And the environmental impact of all of that has been equivalent to taking over 500 million car miles off the road. And we have also saved over 20 billion litres of water, because food production in particular is incredibly water intensive. So when you're throwing away that apple, for example, you're not just throwing away an apple, you're throwing away over 70 litres of water that was used to create that apple. So the environmental impact of what our community has done is absolutely mind-blowing. But what's most exciting to me is we're doing less than 0.1% of our full potential. So just imagine what we can achieve if we get absolutely everybody sharing their spare instead of throwing it away or just letting it gather dust on a shelf.
Apples, you've just reminded me. I have an apple tree here that I can't hope to. I mean, I
Snap
would
a
fill 2
photo.
freezers.
No, snap a photo, add it to the app, ask neighbors to come pick it. So we have lots of people who do that. And then we have lovely sort of stories of circularity where I remember in one instance, a lady had taken a photo of her apple tree. A neighbor had come and picked it, She'd then made apple butter and then gifted some of that back to the lady whose apple tree it was. And then she'd also put some of the spare apple butter on the Oleo app. So, yes, absolutely. No apple waste. Add to Oleo.
I love it. I love it. And the app is going from the personal, but right up to you've got some big organizations involved as well, haven't you? As you
We
mentioned
have.
before, I think Tesco. But tell
Yes.
me about how businesses have got involved.
So we have over 100,000 volunteers and we recruit them from our community and then we train them on our food safety management system. And once you're trained up, you're then an Oleo food waste hero. And as a food waste hero, you can claim a collection slot. And a collection slot is an opportunity to go to a local business and to collect all of their unsold food. You then take it home, you add it to the app, and then within minutes, your neighbours are requesting it and popping round to your house to pick it up. So that takes that food from having been considered, quote unquote, a waste stream in the business to instead, on average, within 1, maximum 2 hours, being fully redistributed into multiple homes in the local community. So we are redistributing the unsold food from over 2,700 Tesco stores, 1,000 Iceland stores, 700 Holland and Barrett stores, over 300 corporate canteens. So if anyone is listening and they work in an office where there's a corporate canteen, please do reach out to us because we can redistribute surplus food from corporate canteens, school canteens, hospital canteens, TV production companies, is an area where we're seeing an awful lot of growth. So anywhere in the local community where there's lots of food being thrown away by a business, we can match them with volunteers and those volunteers will collect and redistribute that food. And that is something that makes sense for the business to do. First of all, businesses are aware as any of us that there is a cost of living crisis going on. And so it's becoming increasingly unacceptable amongst their employees, but also amongst their customers for them to be throwing away food at the scale that they do. So UK businesses at the moment are throwing away over 2 billion meals of perfectly good food every single year. And at the moment that's taking place behind closed doors. And so what we're really trying to do is to raise awareness of that problem, but just as importantly, present those businesses with a solution. So businesses are really incentivized to do it from an employee and a customer perspective, but also they increasingly have their own sustainability targets and they're never going to hit their net zero and sustainability targets when they're throwing away food at the scale that they are.
And that's something that's changed, hasn't it? Because I remember, maybe as little as 5 years ago, even maybe, that big companies were really resistant to do that, partly from a food safety perspective, because they couldn't be seen to be distributing food that was substandard in any way, even if it was free and even if it was, with that understanding.
Yeah, forgive me, I'm a little bit skeptical about that. I think that for far too long, businesses used the smokescreen of health and safety as an excuse not to properly engage with this problem, not to properly solve it. And we have worked very hard with our food safety lawyer, with our primary authorities. That's kind of our government body that looks over what we're doing. And it is absolutely safe and easy and possible to redistribute surplus food. You've just got to figure out the systems and the processes to make that happen. And that is actually sort of one of the beauties of the Oleo model, because it doesn't involve trucks or cars or long supply chains. We're literally about taking that food from a business location and redistributing it into multiple homes in the local community. What that means is that the Oleo model can redistribute hot food, frozen food, chilled food, food with a use by date of today, which means it has to be redistributed by midnight. And that, for the first time, provides these businesses with a real solution to their food waste problem.
I'm thinking of students. My son is a student at
Yes, we have
university.
lots of students on
Were
Oleo.
he to get involved, there would be a load of hungry students that would happily take those meals. And they need
Absolutely,
them.
yes.
They need to be saving that money. We don't want them going out in the world in debt.
No, and one of the benefits of becoming an Oleo food waste hero, so one of our volunteers, is that as a thank you, you do get to keep 10% of the food that you collect if you would like. And so absolutely, we do have quite a lot of students who are food waste heroes because that really helps them balance the books.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And share. share amongst
Yeah,
all the other students. You know, it's a
exactly.
win-win, really, isn't it? I love. I mean, it's all good for me. I'm happy, and I think we came slightly from a similar background in the sense that my parents were very much the same. We weren't farmers, but mum had grown up with very much a gardening background and a grow your own background. And through that last kind of phase of the war and rationing and those things that
Yeah.
our previous generation experienced, that
Hmm.
gave them a sense of this finite resource and of becoming
Absolutely.
more motivated to change that.
Mm. And I grew
How
up with
much of
that.
the waste, sorry, I was going to say, how much of the waste do you think is generational?
So we know that an enormous amount of the waste is generational. I certainly grew up with that expression "waste not, want not" ringing in my
Oh, yeah.
ears because
Oh, yeah.
my parents really were from that post-war generation and that sort of mend and make do attitude. And the reality is that the most wasteful generations are actually the younger generations. And it's really, really critical that we have a proper conversation about our utilization of the world's most precious resources. And the reason why I think this so passionately is because of a concept that I came across a few years ago, which is called Earth Overshoot Day. And Earth Overshoot Day is the day in the year in which humanity has used all the resources that the Earth can replenish in a year. And when it was first measured in the late 60s and early 70s, Earth Overshoot Day was at the end of December. So, what that means is humanity used in a year what the Earth could replenish in a year. We were living in equilibrium with the planet. If you fast forward to this year, Earth Overshoot Day was the 2nd of August. And so, what that means is that every single thing that every single one of us, 8 billion people, are consuming after the 2nd of August is net depletive to the planet. And the reality is that whether we like it or not, we are currently in mass denial about the economic model that we have, which is based on just this endless consumption of things and stuff. And we absolutely need to shift to a new model, which is about reuse, it is about sharing, and it's just about consuming very, very differently. We cannot continue with the current model, which is about buying stuff that was made from resources that were extracted thousands of miles away, shipped halfway across the planet, used for 5% of its useful life, and then eventually end up in landfill. And that's a big part of the reason why we fairly recently launched 2 new sections on the Oleo app. So the core of Oleo is giving stuff away for free, both food items and household items when you're having a bit of a declutter. But the 2 new sections we've launched to really try and tackle the current model of consumption. The first is you can now sell your spare household items to your neighbours. And even more excitingly, we've also got a borrow section on the app where you can list things that you have in your home that you are happy for your neighbours to borrow. So I have already lent out my cat carrier because I've got that, occupying space. We
Oh
don't
my
all
gosh. And
need
they sit in
a
the
cat
cupboard for
carrier
most of the time.
most of the time. We do not all need a cat carrier. We do not all need a pasta machine. That's another thing that I have lent out to a local neighbour. We can lend out all of our books, disco balls, sports equipment, air mattresses. There's no short of things that we have cluttering up our lofts and our garages and our spare rooms. Meanwhile, someone 2 doors down is buying exactly the same thing to clutter up their loft, garage, or spare room. What we really need to be doing is sharing the resources that we already have.
It's so true. I can think of a million things around this house that I can put on that app to say,
Mm.
decorating stuff, for example,
Yes,
which again,
exactly.
tools, which again, you use minimally. Leaf
100%.
blowers.
Yes,
I'm always
exactly.
curious about leaf blowers because I haven't had one for environmental reasons because I think, well, I can sweep the leaves and actually that's a really good workout.
Yes,
But I'm always
exactly.
curious about them. Can somebody lend me a leaf blower maybe?
I am
There's so
sure if you
much.
take
So
a look,
it's
yeah.
huge potential. I'm really excited to get on the app actually. And I'm also inspired by you because as we all know, there's a real difference between having a good idea while you're sitting in the kitchen having a cup of coffee. Somebody should do that. Somebody should
Mm,
really do that. But you didn't. You said, I should do that.
yeah.
And I mean, immediately, what a lot of hassle.
Yes.
You know, what a lot of hassle, what a lot of time,
Yeah.
what a huge investment of yourself to make, never mind money. Um, Tell us what makes that difference? What makes you different to somebody who sat there and gone, no, somebody should do that. That would be a great idea, and then carried on.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. It is life changing setting up a business to try and solve a passionate problem that you're really passionate about. And for the longest time, I wanted to do something entrepreneurial for years, and I made a really big mistake, which was that I was sort of wandering around the world waiting for an idea to drop out from the heavens. And I constantly felt like I didn't have an idea, so I didn't do anything. And what I've retrospectively realized, looking back at my experience through Oleo, is I was going about it all wrong. What I should have been doing was looking out for a problem in the world that I was really passionate about solving. And so it was when I had that experience moving house and I then stumbled across the problem of food waste. The first thing that myself and my co-founder Sasha did was to research the problem of food waste. And what we discovered absolutely blew our brains. We could not believe that this problem wasn't on the front cover of every newspaper. And then we could see that no one was doing anything about this problem. And once we'd been on that journey of discovery, we felt we cannot possibly turn our backs on this. No one is doing anything about this. This problem urgently needs to be solved. So we will just do our best and have a go. And setting up your own business sounds incredibly daunting, but the reality is actually it's just a series of tiny baby steps. And you just need to wake up every single day and just take one more small little baby step and just do that day in, day out, day in, day out. And then it's amazing what you can achieve. And I highly recommend doing it with someone else. I honestly don't feel I would have had the courage or the conviction to do it by myself. And I think part of the problem for that is that, quite honestly, if you look at the role models of tech entrepreneurs, they're not someone who looks or sounds like me. You kind of have this image of an American guy in his early 20s wearing a hoodie that's dropped out of university, that's eating ramen noodles. And I'm like, I'm
And
sort of
is a
a mom.
genius.
Yes, and I'm like, I'm a mom in her middle age who's had a very sort of boring corporate career. So I definitely don't fit that mold at all. But doing it with someone else just makes it much, much easier to take each of those baby steps that you need to take every single day.
Yeah, well done. And what would you say to somebody who was thinking, I have a really great idea, but I don't know where to start?
Well, first of all, I'd say stop thinking about your idea, because that's a really big mistake that lots of founders make. Is they obsess about their idea, they fall in love with their idea. What you need to fall in love with is the problem that you're trying to solve, and your particular idea might or might not be the best way to solve that. So if we take Oleo, for example, we had this vision of a neighbor to neighbor food sharing app, and we thought that that alone would be enough to take off and solve the problem of food waste at scale. And it was only through hard-earned experience that we figured out that we need to develop the Food Waste Heroes program. We need to launch non-food and then non-food selling and all that kind of stuff. And we would never have been able to grow and develop if we had stayed 100% wed to our idea. So you've got to stay wedded to the problem that you want to solve. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would really recommend to people is to figure out, how can you test the solution that you've got to this problem you want to solve in a really kind of low cost or no cost way. How can you do something without having to quit your job or sink your life savings? And so we did a proof of concept for Oleo by using a WhatsApp group, because we were unsure if people would share food with a stranger. And so what we did was we did a market research survey asking people how much they cared or didn't care about food waste. And we then selected 12 people who said they hated food waste, and we asked them if they'd take part in an experiment, and we popped them on a WhatsApp group. They all lived close to one another in North London. And we did this 2-week experiment just using WhatsApp. And we learned so much through that WhatsApp proof of concept, which saved us a fortune when it eventually came to building the app. And so it could be a proof of concept via WhatsApp. It could be starting to build a following on Instagram. Really look to the existing platforms and figure out how you can use them to sort of test your core hypotheses before you invest or build anything. And then I think the third piece of advice I would give is just to become a voracious learner. listen to podcasts. There's no shortage of podcasts around how to set up your own business. And there's a book that I recommend to everybody. It's called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. That absolutely is just mandatory, brilliant reading. And then there's another book called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, which really gives you guidance about how to do that early market research so that you don't ask questions in such a way that you just get the feedback that you really want to hear.
Is it
Mom
MOM?
test. Yeah,
Right.
the American.
So it's not a test
mom
of how good a mom you are, because having
No,
lived in America, that's what I heard.
no,
I was like,
no.
oh, okay.
No, it's about how to do market
Always
research so you don't get sort of the feedback that your mum would give you, which is the lovely feedback.
right. Actually, that's exactly the point, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I
Yeah,
think it's brilliant. Yeah, but you would say
yeah.
that.
You would say that because you're my mum.
And you're my friend, or you're my, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
absolutely. I hear you on that one. And what are the biggest challenges now moving ahead?
Honestly, every day is a challenge. It's just a different challenge. And that's one of the things I would say about the entrepreneurial journey. It's just a constant series of false summits. So you always think, when I get to that point, I will be happy, life will be easy. And then when you get to that point, you realize, oh gosh, no, I've got all these problems to solve and I need to get to this next point. So I think you've got to have a very open, optimistic, glass half full type of mentality. You have to be someone who really enjoys and thrives in uncertainty and problem solving. And I think sort of the challenges that remain consistent through the journey are really about how to create impact when you've got very little resources. As a founder, you never have as much money or as big a team as you would like. So you've just got to be incredibly resourceful, and think really creatively and laterally about how you are going to solve problems. For us, our biggest challenge as an organization really is just trying to drive consumer behavior change at scale. The reality is that generations and generations of us have been indoctrinated from birth to believe that our role in life is to be a consumer and to shop and to waste and to go out and shop some more. And we're really trying to help to play our part in kind of rewiring ourselves and our society, and that's really difficult. It takes a long time. It takes an awful lot of persuasion, and it's an ongoing challenge for us, a problem that we still haven't cracked yet, but we're not going to give up trying.
Yeah. Changing the shopping culture. I mean, I've noticed so many times that for some people, Saturday is a day just to go and shop for the sake of shopping, just to go wander around the shops. Personally, I can't think of anything worse.
I've
get
given up shopping,
overwhelmed.
actually. I must admit, I'm
Good
sort
for
of
you. Yeah, I don't think I do. I mean, unless I need something, unless there's something in
yeah.
particular that I need to get or go to or whatever. But I get really overwhelmed with just the
Me
sheer
too.
amount of stuff.
Me too. And I unfortunately find it really, really uncomfortable going into shops nowadays, because I walk into a shop, I see the sea of stuff. It's wall to wall stuff. And I know that every single thing in every single shop that I walk into is going to find its way to landfill, sometimes within 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, certainly 20 years. Almost everything you see in every single store is going to go to waste. And that makes me feel physically sick. It's nausea inducing, and you realize that it's profoundly unsustainable. We have to reinvent how we live, how we spend our time. And the reality is that living more sustainably does involve us shopping less, but it frees then up so much more time to do things that are far more satisfying and far more fun, that are about building human connections. They're more sustainable, and it saves you money at the end of the day. So the message that we really want to take to people about sustainable living is that it makes you healthier, wealthier, and happier. It's not about sacrifice and compromise.
And so often it can be about creativity as well. So,
Yeah.
Whether that's batch cooking if you've got a glut of something, or for me, it turns into renovating old furniture, which I never quite have the time to finish, but I always make a good start on, and I got
Love a
always
project.
more projects. more projects waiting than I've actually done. But when I do it, when I go, right, it's a rainy Saturday, I'm going to actually concentrate on that footstool or whatever that
100%.
I've been planning in the back of my head for ages. It's just such a nice feeling to bring something back to life.
It is, and I think that everybody has their thing. You just need to find it. So I would be useless at upcycling furniture, and other people are brilliantly talented at it. But for me, sort of my thing that I found that I can do, which is incredibly satisfying, is actually one of the things you just mentioned, which is batch cooking. So instead of spending the day on a Saturday or Sunday shopping, I will spend the day batch cooking, and that way I am dramatically reducing our food waste. It is all organic, zero waste, plant based as much as I can. So I am feeding my family healthy, sustainable food. It is cheaper and it's just immensely satisfying to do that. And it also saves an awful lot of time. So it means I don't need to cook during the week. I literally batch cook for the whole week, leave it in the fridge, and then every evening I just take out what I've prepared, pop it into the oven, cook some fresh veggies as well to go with it. And it's, for me, it's the ultimate sustainable living hack. It just
And
helps it all work
ease. I mean,
well.
it's convenient when you do it like that.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it on a Sunday, putting some nice music on or a TV program
100%.
and just
Or a
piddling around the
podcast.
kitchen. Or a podcast. Exactly.
Yeah,
Podcasts are cleaning for me.
that's when I binge all my my podcasts, is when I'm batch cooking on a Sunday afternoon, and it's my me time. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm glad we've got that in common as well. We've got a lot in common.
Yes, yes. And the other thing in
Tessa,
favour
it's
of
been
batch cooking is you get
fantastic
in
to
your
speak to you.
steps.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, I'm always stunned because on a day when I've done batch cooking, I'll get in like 25,000 steps because you're also just constantly moving around. So it really is the ultimate win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm joining. I'm on the app and it's free to join, I'm guessing.
It is,
What do
yes,
I
yes,
need to know
absolutely.
as a newbie?
Well, it's very simple to join. You basically just need to kind of sign up with name, email address, and then off you go. You will see all the listings that are available near you. But I really recommend for people to get going, you have a little bit of a declutter, and you'll be amazed the things that people want. And it's just about taking that sort of 10 seconds to add it to the app, and someone else will be able to really, really appreciate that thing, give it a second life or upcycle it or just make best use of it rather than it cluttering up your rooms or even worse, ending up in your bins.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time because it's a busy schedule, I know.
Pleasure.
So thank you again for taking the time to join us and
No
share the
worries.
Oleo app and your story, which is just a brilliant one. Good luck with it and keep in touch, won't you?
Thank you very much. I will do. Yes.